much for having me. I will today provide a talk, the gazillionth talk about GitOps. GitOps on the edge is a use case we have here, maintaining infrastructure of sovereign clients. And you can expect a customer story that ran successfully. To just give you a sneak peek how it will turn out at the end, but you will see on your own. And it turned out well, even though the tides were pulling us into different directions. So we will see about that in a minute. And for the beginning, as you may have guessed, a customer story will have a beginning. There will be some heroes that need to accomplish some challenges, and there are things to learn, and we have a happy ending. And I hope also there will be a revelation for you in it, so you can take something with you to your project, and that would be very nice. Okay, let's start with the why, how, and what. So beginning with the why would GitOps be helpful to operate distributed setup on the edges of your network, which is not the default case when you think of GitOps. Mostly you think about cloud native and Kubernetes, but this time it will be different. How did we implement that? I will show you. And what were the results? How did we actually complete our mission? And what were the learnings? Okay, I'm Steven, obviously. The other one here shown should be Uwe, but Uwe is sick, so I will hold this presentation on my own today. The me up here is 6 years younger. Maybe visible, and has not fought so many battles in DevOps, but in the past 6 years there were some battles to fight, and also Steven there, up there, got to know how a DevOps core team can work internally when working for a company, and also how community leading can work not only internally for my employer but also for the customer. So that's one aspect of the project I will be showing you today. And actually I wouldn't, it's a little pickle we have here. Up there stands senior software engineer, but the photo tells me rather baby software engineer. But that turned out well. Now I'm looking more adult, and maybe people are trusting me actually to implement something for them, which was not the case for Uwe, because Uwe has 34 years of experience, a lot of in the area of architecture, software architecture, and somehow specializing also in infrastructure and DevOps engineering. And together we are in a project we will see. And because actually Uwe was meant to be here to be my emotional support, because for him conferences are just daily routine. I figured, but not for me. Maybe you have guessed in front of a large audience that that's not really my strong suit, but today we will try to accomplish this successfully. Okay, moving on. I'd like to hear from you and see your hands when you think you know something about my employer called Iteratec. That's nice to see. I guess you're maybe from Hamburg, maybe from another big city in Germany. Because they are so low hands, of course, I will give you a small introduction to who I'm working for. Iteratec is a company specializing in finding individual solutions for big challenges. And we have our own cycle. It's not the DevOps cycle, but rather the software development process cycle. And we thought it would be wise to separate a few specialities we have, like creating, of course, having ideas, introducing ideas to our customers, then coding those ideas, and also caring about them, where we would be talking about DevOps and maintenance of software. And all around there we have coaching, because we think that coaching is vital for adoption of digital solutions. And yeah, that's what the basic idea about Iteratech, and we have also some smart words made up so it sounds even better, and that's how we're calling it this, developing digital champions. So we want to make our customers digital champions, and we do that by showing attitude, style, and performance, so we can support our customers in the digitalization strategies. Okay, we can't really compete with the size of our customers. As you can see from these numbers, we have several offices in different locations, but basically the customers we have are much larger, but customers turn to us when they think there's a sweet spot where special care is needed for software development, and there we can help really well. And maybe after this talk, you will also think that the solution we have found in our current context is a good solution, and maybe you will turn to us too. Okay, going to the what's the problem at hand. Basically, the upcoming explanation will be about you can have a greenfield project where you can have all the decisions at hand. The customer is easy to talk to, and it's easy to explain to him what the current movements and trends are in IT. So what we came up with is a microservice and front-end landscape that looks like this. And here you can see all the famous and state-of-the-art tools that can be used to build verticals. So we're not only building microservices, but integrated with micro frontends. We can have domain teams, 4 in this case, that can each develop their own domain-specific line of business. And they can do so on verticals, and everything can be integrated in the browser to deliver business value to the users. In the backend, we have Java Spring Boot, PostgreSQL, and also we use messaging based on Kafka. So that doesn't really look that interesting. I think most of the tools are state-of-the-art, and you know them. But the business behind it will not be any topic for today, but I can assure you it's straightforward. Basically, it's about a CRUD application that needs to be implemented. We will focus on the more DevOpsy and infrastructure things today. Okay, moving forward, we also have a context for our application. There are many systems to integrate with via APIs that sometimes are well documented, sometimes not. And here you can see a snippet what there is to integrate with. Not that much of interest for our journey today, but just maybe it's of interest to you as a takeaway. Okay. The real information that's important here is everything you see here is used in offices, and those offices are connected to a data center, and every app that is listed here is provided from this data center. It's not on the cloud, it's no public cloud, but instead the data center of our customer, where we host all the apps that users need for their daily work. and I will try to explain to you why this architecture was chosen, so on-premise data center in contrast to cloud-native operation. And that will I do by first coming to the non-functional requirements we had in our project. Another aspect that's important to address, because we have an availability to assure for 99.9%. Our principal software architect Uwe said, okay, that sounds really feasible. He has seen a lot worse or a lot more complicated requirements for other customers. And when it comes to availability, we have the common tools in use from the infrastructure and DevOps area, like GitOps, implementing DevOps, having Kubernetes in place, and all the fancy tools you have heard about today and yesterday. Okay, let's check out how would this be addressed in a normal case. Uwe decided to put up here on this slide a reference architecture for serverless computing. And in this case, you can see there are many details, many things that you can, many tools and many concepts that you can use to address availability of your application, but that's everything that we can't use in our case. And I will explain to you now why that's the case. So what's the real problem behind the application we want to implement? Because from my point of view, developing a greenfield application like ours is not really the hard task. So where does the expertise of Iteratec come into play? And I think that's what I want to show you right now. That's getting stormy. Okay, much text here, but not really for you to read right now, but please just listen. We have 6 challenges to address on the constraint and non-functional requirements side, not the actual business that needs to be implemented with our app, and the first being that there's professional secrecy in the business area of our customer, and that needs to be addressed on an infrastructure level, and the customer did extensive research and evaluation how those requirements that stem from professional secrecy map to actually operate in an application. And it turned out, you can see it on the right side, that public clouds are prohibited by the customer. Very extensive decision, of course, so we're not in the cloud native area anymore, but maybe, we will see that later, we will be able to still implement some of the best practices we know from cloud native tooling. GitOps, of course. And here we can see a very important constraint that we have, and namely, we have sovereign clients, and those sovereign clients have infrastructure they own themselves, and we are not allowed to access those infrastructure on the edge, so in the remote locations where the clients actually are using the software that gets written. Okay, that's the gist of this slide. Going on, we have another challenge, and this challenge is about network throughput. So you may think that shouldn't be a problem in the 4th biggest national economy worldwide, but it is. We have to address it. Shout out to Volker from our Federal Ministry of Digital and Transport, who says he addresses this fact, but actually I think we have not come very far in our endeavors to roll out broadband bandwidth to all the locations we have in Germany. So at the moment we're talking about a lot of remote sites. You can see here 450 cities that we need to integrate in our network for the customer. And bandwidth is an issue right here, because we have use cases like, for example, scanning of documents and uploading of those documents that really would need broadband to be available, but it is not. And that's a fact that we need to address somehow. And as it turns out, we will in the end host our own content delivery network, not rely on Azure or Google or whatsoever, but instead host our own content delivery network. Going on to the next slide, we have a third challenge. It's about IT support. Basically, we don't have no IT knowledge available at the locations where infrastructure needs to run, but instead there's an external service provider that needs to get or pack stuff and drive to the customer and needs to check out why infrastructure may not run. So we have just a problem with the remote setup here that can be a real bummer. And what this means is we need to have solutions in place that are plug and play, because the provider should only set up something, turn a switch on, and everything works out of the box. So this is another constraint we need to address. Automation is key here. And what this may lead to is that we need to pull changes for the infrastructure that has been set up from the central data center into the office location where operation is actually done. Okay. Next challenge. What is it about? We have the operation not only for servers but workplaces as well. Because, as you can imagine, an office that hosts or that has users that want to interact with software you have in the data center, they're not only having their workplaces, but there's a server setup we have, and also something like a telephone appliance, like printers, like scanners. So all kinds of peripherals that are included here. Lucky for us, we don't have to roll out any firmware updates, but instead our only concern here is to provision the server that is located in an office. And the other concern, which I'm not talking about today, is how can actually provisioning of workplaces can work. So we have clients, users interact with it, and which kind of software, which kind of tooling can you use to roll out software to it, which is, yeah, I guess to many of you not that familiar if you're not really part of the admin team of your own company. Okay, heading over to the fifth challenge. Again, a big slide, many notes here. The gist of it is we have the 400 legal entities, GmbH, LLP is the translation, and those are sovereign entities. All belong to an enterprise group, and this enterprise group is the provider of the software that we write. And there's another entity, which is here called Enterprise Group IT Service Provider, that is operating the individual locations that belong to the legal entities. But there can also be other external service providers, and that's also a fact that we need to address. So the solutions we have can only work if it's so well documented and based on standardized tools that not only the enterprise group IT service provider can roll out changes, but also external partners. Okay, the sixth challenge we need to address is, again, a repetition to some extent of the first challenge because of the professional secrecy, or autonomous obligation is another term for it. We can boil this down to two solutions being available in our case. The first one being currently in use, maybe it can be optimized. We have a workflow of requiring or requesting access, granting access, performing actions, and supervising those actions, which needs to be addressed in a manual workflow between the IT service provider and the Office network. And the other option here, solution 2, would be to move to a GitOps approach. You can see pull changes, push metrics, push inventory, just actions that we can automate, and maybe something that we need to take a closer look on, and you may have guessed it, we did that. Okay, moving on. How did we solve it? Our main concern here was, let's take a look on it. The customer has experience with operating 5 on-premise clusters in the data center, but not 280 clusters, potential clusters or servers in the remote locations. So obviously it's currently being done, but it's based on manual scripts. And the challenge that this leads to is we don't have the manpower to actually address that we can use Kubernetes in the remote locations right now. And there's a timeline attached to it. So a deadline we have 1.5 years, which will be up in the next month. And as it looks, we found a solution in that time frame that we can actually roll out to a broader audience. Okay, let's go on. I want to just summarize the usual difficulties you have when getting to know a customer and the legacy infrastructure and processes there. We have the development and operations and also the servers in this case that need to be administered. And when the developer says, I have new software, please make it run, the administration team asks, okay, please send me a zip file with what you want to execute and maybe tell me also what kind of dependencies you have so I can install it on the servers. That's not how we want to do DevOps today, so we need to overcome this fact. And yeah, basically that's it. The current solution looks like this. We have a file storage where manual scripts are hosted, and those scripts get pulled from these servers. So we have some kind of GitOps already in place because you have a storage here in place, which is at the moment not Git, but something different. And we have an agent running, which is basically a cron job that asks for updates and executes the scripts that are part of the file storage. So can that be replaced by something that is more modern? Of course it can. The DevOps engineer says, okay, there's work to do, let's go. And when talking to the other stakeholders we met at the company, we saw Ansible as a solution that is already in use. And this solution is used to set up virtual machines in the data center, but not for something like we currently want to address regarding servers that are operated on the edge. So I thought, okay, Ansible is nice for configuration management, but containers, would it also be nice for orchestration? I still think that's not the optimal solution we have here. Uwe thought, okay, when we are now talking about Ansible and also a wrapper that is included in Ansible called Ansible Pull, which is addressing the fact that you can pull a repository to get instructions for the playbook that you want to run with Ansible. Maybe we're heading towards GitOps, and that's just the start of the journey. Okay, I will skip the summary what GitOps is about. I think you heard enough talks already in the last days, or in today and yesterday. And rather head to the real interesting part, and that's about how would the new solution look like. Okay, we would replace the file storage with a Git repository, and in that fashion we only need to replace where we describe the instructions. We can do so in a standardized way, and we can install an agent called Ansible Pull onto the servers that takes care of actually pulling updates and executing them. Okay, that's now going. Now I'm going into the details of what. Let me check the time. Yeah. How much is it? 5. Okay. Configuration management with GitOps. You can also call it, of course, infrastructure as code. The definition for GitOps says it is a little more than infrastructure as code, but basically what we need here is an architecture that solves the problems we have. And those look like, in the end, this architecture looks like this. We have a Git repository on the right-hand side, a package repository where we can deliver or provide the package that is taking care of installing Ansible, and also the cron job that will be used on an Office server. So Ansible pull is started regularly and asks for updates, pulls updates, sees there's a change, and can execute or make decisions based on the instructions that were pulled. So Ansible playbook will be called here, and what we have in the end is we can roll out binaries and configurations. Because we're not talking about containers here, as you can see, because we needed to make little steps together with the ops team of the external service provider. And those little steps included that we started with systemd instead of containers. So, here, there's a special case here that's interesting, but maybe not that interesting to you. Namely, it is about how to secure sensitive information. And we use, or in Ansible, there's a tool called Ansible Vault that can be used. But at the time that we wrote the proof of concept, we decided for the solution Mozilla SOPs. Surely familiar to you, can be used to encrypt secrets and store it safely in Git. And that's how we managed also to make this setup, at least in one perspective, more secure. And now, going forward, I think basically we have addressed the architecture that we have implemented here. And taking a look, what we want to concentrate right now on is that we can replace the rollout of packages and configurations here by introducing containers, which was the case after we earned us some trust, and the admins then decided, okay, we can go with a container runtime that is popular, that is known, and thus Docker was installed in our test environment, so we could start to use containers here and interface with the Ansible role for it, so we can actually operate and manage in a very basic way containers. Okay. To sum up, we had some hardships here, obviously, which I've been talking about, and we achieved some things. Roughly after about a 3/4 year, we had the solution in place in 34 office locations in a basic setup and in a more extended setup in a test environment, which we're currently extending as we can. And now coming to the use cases and wrapping up. What is this all about? Why do we need such a solution? You can see here bandwidth monitoring, as I said earlier, is a problem for us. We need to gather more insights, how it can actually be accomplished that our app can run, including all the features that are attached to it on a location where DSL rates are very low. And thus, we will have a short look on what we're using here to make it work and gather insights. And we can see here we're relying on the Prometheus and Grafana stack. and an array that is not that common or gets more common every day, in my opinion, because we're using the push architecture that Prometheus started implementing for remote writing metrics. Okay. There's also something about logging. There's something about the content delivery network. And yeah, as I told you before, there's a test environment available that can be used to actually not go right into production, but instead install something in the basement of the headquarters of our customer, because there's a location set up that is similar to something that we would experience in an office. Okay, those are the learnings we had. We don't need Kubernetes to implement GitOps. It's a key takeaway for this topic, for the talk I want to give here. And we can implement a lot of best practices we know from GitOps and improve the situation with our customer and the collaboration with the external service provider. Okay. What are things we want to still keep doing or start doing? Of course, we want to roll out the setup to more locations. We want to migrate the systemd service to containers. We want to maybe support Windows. We will need to have a talk about that, of course, because it will be a little more difficult. And to me, very important is evaluate the architecture we have implemented here, because maybe there are solutions that can include Kubernetes in a very lightweight way, so we have not a bottleneck for our ops teams. And in the end, or as a very extended thing, we want to implement also real user monitoring, which Prometheus will help us with. Okay, that's about it. I think we're a little over time, but thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your talk. We are completely fine with the timing. It was perfect. Any questions on the audience? Or on the app, perhaps? I have one. What makes you use Ansible? Meaning, have you considered any other solutions aside of Ansible? Did you had experience with Ansible, which makes you choose it? Well, how?
We had experience with Ansible, so it was visible on one slide. I had experience with Ansible, and I'm basically the only one that implements in our team. Uwe is consultant for me to some extent, and we talk about the architecture solutions that we can implement. But having experience was important, so we can start right away. As I said, there were no experience with cluster operation at the operators we needed to work with, so we needed to find a solution that can work without extensive cluster operation tools like Rancher or K3S or something like that. And so for ages, do you expect to implement like a lightweight Kubernetes implementation, like for offices in the end, on the edge? Sorry? Do you how could I explain? So, do you have in your roadmap somewhere a milestone, say, okay, on the edges of our infrastructure, we will deploy some lightweight Kubernetes implementation because it will be easier for us to manage, easier to deploy, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Yeah, it will be definitely easier for us as developers, but I think it's a long-term goal to move towards an orchestration that can handle our containers, but short-term, in the time frame I said, we didn't see it really to find a way to make Kubernetes work. Mm-hmm. So that's about it. Cool, thank you very much. One last questions in the audience? Nobody? Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. A big round of applause for our speaker, please.